Today I'm going to talk about something, and I think because it involves all of us, not only those of us in this room, but everybody on this planet. And my approach to it is highly personal, because the issue first struck me because of where I was 50 years ago this month. And 50 years ago, this month was August 1967. August 1967. It was the end of the Summer of Love in the Haight-Ashbury. And the year before, at the age of 21, I had come to San Francisco to study law at Hastings College of Law. 1 year later, I was living on Haight Street, working at the food concessions at the Avalon Ballroom where the Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin, and all those bands were. There I was, much to the chagrin of my parents. But there I was. Well, what happened in the Haight-Ashbury, to me, was I was exposed to certain truths and possibilities that had never entered my mind before. And one of those was the work of Edgar Cayce, the extraordinary American psychic and medium. And what he said that never left my mind was he predicted two things, and I didn't know how intertwined they were until later. He predicted the golden age of mankind was going to come, an age where brothers and sisters of humanity would join together in an age that we had never experienced, an age of peace, brotherhood, joy, experience, and abundance. But what also caught my attention was his prediction of what Edgar Cayce called the earth changes. And I was much more affected by that because my mind was much more affected by what could go wrong than what could go right at that period. And the earth changes that Edgar Cayce predicted were the east coast and west coast of the United States were going to fall off. That the Mississippi River Valley was going to empty. The Great Lakes were going to empty into the Mississippi River Valley, splitting this nation in two. Japan would fall into the sea. Europe would be affected. Earthquakes and severe earth changes would overtake the earth. Well, at the age of 22 or 23, where I was at the time, I had much of my life to live. And issues such as living, marriage, kids, and life still confronted me. But what Edgar Cayce said never quite left my consciousness. Around 20 years later, in the mid-1980s, I read another series of books that were extraordinary. Books that I considered to be from the source itself. And the book said there were going to come a time, relatively soon in humanity's experience, where we would experience severe cataclysmic geographical shifts. And these books basically reflected what Edgar Cayce was going to say. The East Coast and West Coast were going to fall off the continental United States. The Great Lakes were going to empty into the Mississippi River Valley. Japan was going to go into the ocean, along with other things. Europe was going to take a beating. Now, I had sort of put Edgar Cayce's predictions up on the shelf to the future, and by this time I was, 40 instead of my 20s. And neither the Golden Age or the earthquakes had happened yet. But I sort of knew in the pit of my stomach I was getting closer. Right? But what I call this, with information that I can't quite absorb or quite accept, I put it on the shelf. I don't know enough to dismiss it, and I don't have enough data to believe it. So I put this on the shelf, but since I was 20 years older, it just came to me that it was on a lower shelf than before. All right? So now I come to Tucson in the year 2000. Not expecting to stay here, but Martha and I were going to come and go off to wherever. But here we are. And I got introduced to spiritualism and to mediumship and a psychic ability on a level I never had before. And we run into the incredible psychic medium, Hoyt Robinette, in 2006. This is before we came to the temple. And here he is, and he's telling me things that are extraordinary. He's telling Martha things that are extraordinary. So I say to Hoyt, how about the earth change? And for those of you who know Hoyt, his eyes were closed, he's holding on to that piece of paper. There was a pause. And his answer was, day by day, they're getting closer. Right? A little lower on the shelf. Right? Now I come to the Temple of Universality. And Monica Rankin, who is at the forum, and I'm not sure what room she's in, she walks up and gives me 2 channelings that had come through Carlos Blair, through Dr. Robert Ireland in a trance state. The 2 channelings she gave me were about the earth changes. One was from 1980, and another one was in 1992. And I read these channelings, and Dr. Carlos Blair referred to the 1980 channeling in his 1992 channeling. And he said there was going to be a time of upheaval in this country, financially, geographically. A major change was coming upon the earth. All right? But this was going to be needed because it was going to drive us closer together. It was going to bring us closer together out of necessity. We would begin to care for each other in a way we had stopped caring for each other. But he said in these readings that much of these changes would happen by the year 2000. All right? Now, I knew that predictions on the other side of the veil are made without the help of time and space. Because those who are in an ascended state in another dimension, they don't operate in time and space. To us, time and space is the very matrix of our experience. And we can't imagine a state without time and space. So I thought, well, you know, it's 2006, 7. These things haven't happened. Maybe they're not going to. I had no idea. But the next year when Hoyt came, Reverend Betty Tadleski had told Martha and me, she said, you know, because we'd done these things. We did private readings with Hoyt. We did the card readings because we like the cards. But we hadn't done the direct voice. All right? And Betty goes, you got to do the direct voice. All right. And we said, what do we do? He said, just sign up, because you've done the group trumpet, right? So we signed up. We had no idea what's going to happen. None. It's 2009. Darkened room. You're sitting there with Hoyt. Hoyt does the Lord's Prayer with you, and he drops off into a trance state halfway through. Jokingly, I used to think of telling Hoyt later, I said, you know, Hoyt, it's not that long. You could memorize the rest of it. But he's in a trance state, and who comes in? Dr. Kenner, Hoyt's gatekeeper, who Martha and I had gotten to know over the years. Right? And Dr. Kenner goes, do you have any questions? And I go, well, yeah, I got one this time. He says, I didn't. He said, okay. I said, you know, I had been reading some, you know, I prefaced this as if Dr. Kenner didn't know about the earth changes, right? And I prefaced that I had just run into some channelings by Dr. Carlos Blair about these things, and they hadn't happened. And they were going to happen by 2000. And I prefaced this by saying, and I know on the other side, time and space doesn't exist, so, right? And boom, who comes in? The voice. Hello, this is Dr. Carlos Blair. Thank you for giving me wiggle room. But I want to assure you that changes are in motion. And I go, to the degree of severity that you predicted, and Dr. Carlos Blair said, yes. That was 2009. All right? Now, on my own progression, in 1991, I heard these words that were talking about a complete economic collapse, called the time of the vulture. I mean, complete And these words came to me after years of intense meditation. It didn't look like anything like that was going to happen. But I began studying economics very intently. Very intently. And so by the year 2006, I had developed a paper and a theory, and I presented this. The reason why I knew where I was in August in 1967 was because of what happened then. I know exactly where Martha and I were 10 years ago. 10 years ago in August 2007, we were in Hungary. And I was giving a talk on Austrian economics. Our appearance there wasn't known, but Hoyt Robinette had told us that spring. He said, you will be speaking this summer in front of a group of, and he paused, thinkers. We had no idea what he meant. A few months later, we were in Hungary, in Zombuté, talking before a group that had been gathered there to study Austrian economics. And in that month, in August, we were in a monastery, that's where it was being held. We would run down every morning to look at the computers because there was no Wi-Fi signals. But the monastery had these computers set up. And I remembered one day when I and the rest of these people who were focused in on economics saw that a credit contraction was sweeping through global markets. And we knew something was wrong. We already knew something was wrong, but this was evidence that it was coming. This was the first shot across the bow. 1 year later, Wall Street was going to collapse. And it was only because of government intervention and massive money printing that it got back up on its feet. This is 10 years later. And I want to tell you, I have the same feeling that I had in 2007. We're 10 years closer, and it's going to crack. What I didn't know in 1967 was the connection between the economic collapse and the new golden age. What I didn't know in 1967, at the Summer of Love, was a connection between the economic collapse, the earth changes, and the golden age. But as Martha told you today, I am always looking on that shelf. I am always looking for other information about what interests me. And I'm going to read you something that explains where we are today and where we'll be tomorrow. This was a channeling by the Hathors, extra-dimensional beings that came in to help us through the period that we are going through. The channeling that I'm going to read you happened in 2006. And as I read it, I want you to remember, because there's a reference to the coming economic change. And he says, months away. This was indeed months away in 2006. This is the title. This is from a Hathors, 2006. This is their channeling. You are about to enter another catalytic and volatile phase of global transformation. From our perspective, it would be helpful for you to understand that, as a collective, you are poised between two contrasting worlds. Your present reality is shifting before your eyes, and along with it, many of your current philosophical and religious paradigms, as well as your economic and political structures, are being challenged, to say the least. In terms of cultural thought, forms, and values, you are entering a kind of no man's land, where your social anchors and benchmarks will be of little use to you. Your present global cultural reality is changing radically in ways that will be difficult to control, especially for those currently in power. But while the dissolution of your present world is accelerating, so are the beginnings of your future reality, which, as we have mentioned earlier, will be multidimensional in nature, with many diverse cultural and artistic viewpoints coexisting simultaneously. But before this possible new renaissance can take place, however, humanity seems headed into an increase of catalytic and volatile events to shake loose its fixation on certain beliefs that no longer work in mankind's best interests, and are in fact a danger to the continuance of biological life on this planet. In other words, your collective cultural beliefs and how you live in your world are threatening life itself. The seeds of this new world of which we speak are already being sown, and some of the new ways of thinking, feeling, and being are starting to show themselves in embryonic ways. Look to your new generations to see how signs of the new world are showing themselves. What some people view as antisocial and aberrant behaviors are, in some cases, an attempt to return to a type of personal sanity in a world that has gone mad. Remember that you are moving between the present way of thinking and living to an as yet undefined sense of the new world and its vast potentials for spiritual and cultural evolution. But this movement into your future that some call a golden age is not in fact guaranteed or a done deal, as the saying goes. Your future, both individually and collectively, depends upon what you choose to do or don't do now in each and every moment of your present reality. The future, in other words, does not just happen, but rather it is forged in the foundry of personal choice. We think it is vital that you understand what you are up against as you move to create a more benevolent and life-friendly future. We say this because there are those who would shape the emerging new world and this new age of humanity according to their own selfish ends. Many of them have held the reins of the old world into the present moment through the power of money and politics, while others have held the reins through spiritual dominance and control. These forces will not let go of their power lightly. We have said on many occasions that you can change your destiny in the last final moments. The prophecies of doom need not come true, for you are the creators of your future. Though to be more exact, you are actually the co-creators of your future. And the co-creator with you in this task of creating a new world is consciousness itself. Some of what you call God or Goddess, but which we refer to as the Great Mystery. The energies of self-awareness and spiritual evolution continue to emanate from deep space, as we mentioned previously. Yet collectively, humanity still resists this impulse to a higher evolution and awareness. To be fair to you, you have been and continue to be manipulated by those who wield planetary power for their own personal gain. They are not interested in the elevation of humanity. Far from it. And so you are caught between the pressures of spiritual evolution, which are bombarding you from deep space, and those who increasingly work to control and manipulate you. The continual inability of humanity to move upward in consciousness, whether through an inherent defect in its nature or through control and manipulation, will have potentially devastating effects upon your ecological systems. Expect further increases in erratic weather patterns, volcanic activity, and earthquakes. And although your science does not recognize this, we would say to you that such activities are both natural cycles of your earth as a conscious being, and also the result of a co-creation between you, earth, and herself. Your collective thought forms and patterns of emotion, not to mention your physical actions, have direct effects upon earth, her evolution, and the evolution of life as you know it. You will see that previously we have advocated you store food and water, as well as emergency supplies, a precaution for potential disruptions due to economic, climatic, and seismic shifts. We would say this is not precautionary, but a highly probable possibility. True, catastrophe can be averted at the 12th hour if the collective spiritual vibration of humanity were to move upward in mass. But we do not, unfortunately, see this in your timeline, at least at this time. So we advise you to make some practical plans for yourself and your loved one, just in case normal sources of food and water become disrupted. We also mentioned previously a timeline regarding the value of your money. And that timeline is now upon us. Unless some unforeseen force comes into play, This economic downturn will most likely take place on a global level in the next few months. How severe it will be depends upon many factors, not the least of which are international decisions made by those who hold the reins to world power. No one can say for certain what your future will be like, either individually or collectively, because there is always the possibility for conscious choice at any moment. And conscious choice or intent can and does alter the quantum field of consciousness itself, and thus eventually even physical reality, if the power of choice or intent is strong enough. And so it is that we do not predict your future. We are only saying what we see in your timeline, unless you collectively make different choices in how you live your lives and how you deal with each other and the earth. In many ways, survival is an intelligence test. In this light, we would say that the cosmic test of increased spiritual evolution is putting you and everyone else under extreme pressure. Nothing less than an upward movement in global consciousness will suffice. Nothing less than spiritual mastery will allow you to pass through the eye of the needle that is upon you. Those who master the new vibratory realms of consciousness and find ways to express them in physical reality in how they live their lives will be the stewards who bring in the new age and the new world. We have spoken many times about the need for states of ecstasy and bliss, as these are the signatures of the higher vibratory realms of which we speak. And although we have said and continue to say that entering these states is inherently easy, we all recognize that they are difficult to create when you are under duress. This is why we encourage you to find your spiritual center in these increasingly difficult times. By spiritual center, we mean the still point within you, where you are in touch with your own inner nature. For some, this means regular meditation. For others, it means being in nature. For others, it means being with animals, or some other way of connecting and your inner self. Whatever means you have found to center yourself, you must make it second nature and do it regularly. We say this because as your world becomes more chaotic, it will be more difficult to find your center unless you have trained yourself to enter it at will. The vibratory realms of ecstasy, bliss, appreciation, and gratitude are not just elevators of consciousness. They are also protectors. They will help you to remain in a higher vibratory field from those around you, should they descend into lower expressions of their nature. Should you find yourself in such situations, we suggest you quietly, without drawing attention to yourself, move your emotions into these higher realms of appreciation, gratitude, ecstasy, and bliss. And although you will be in the same physical dimension as those around you, you will be in a different emotional and vibratory dimension. And when it comes to fate or destiny, it all hinges on vibration. Specifically, what vibrational realm you are residing in. And this ultimately depends, as do most things, upon choice. From one perspective, to be sure, you are entering extremely dangerous times. From another perspective, you have an unprecedented opportunity to rapidly accelerate your spiritual evolution and mastery. These opportunities exist literally because of the pressure waves of evolution, and the social and cultural pressures to conform are hitting you from all sides. You are, in a sense, much like a piece of coal that is placed under immense pressure. A pressure that is seemingly beyond your control. It is indeed uncomfortable to live through such pressure, but the result, spiritually speaking, is that you become a diamond. We hold for you a vision of your grandest destiny. We hold this vision in our hearts. This is true, but only you can make it so. Namaste.
Namaste.